reductio ad absurdum starts by assuming the falsity of the thesis. If the thesis is false, what follows from it? And then you go on to show that what follows and should be true on the basis of the falsity of the thesis, what should be true, is itself false. So if that is false, then the denial of the thesis is false, and the thesis is true. Now, did you catch that? Get it out in writing, and you'll see. Okay, to prove A, what you do is start by asserting non-A. Okay, if non-A, then B. But B is false. Therefore, A is true. Again, you're looking blank. Must be Valentine's Day or something. Don't you just love this? Valentine's Day. Don't you just love this? All right, the wiggly line is the negative. At least you're awake. The wiggly line is the negative. Not A. All right, not A implies B. Okay, but not B. Now, if you deny the consequent, okay, you deny the antecedent. Not A, that is to say A. So you've proven A. Now, that's his procedure in these proofs. And you can trace it through for yourself. In the first case, he starts, you see, if we assumed that the world had no beginning in time, then an eternity must have elapsed up to every given point of time. And therefore, an infinite series of states of things must have passed in the world. However, here it comes, an infinite series consists in this, that it can never be completed. So an infinite series is impossible. And the beginning of the world is a necessary condition of its existence. The world had a beginning. This was what had to be proved. QED. There it is. So he does that sort of thing on the thesis and antithesis. In both those cases, the result is that both the thesis and the antithesis are proven to be true. That is an antinomy, isn't it? Contradiction of the law of non-contradiction. Well, he does the same again with the second one on 436. Every compound substance in the world consists of simple parts. Nothing exists anywhere but the simple, or what's composed of it. There are indivisible units, you see. And the antithesis, no compound thing consists of simple parts. There exists nowhere in the world anything simple, indivisible. Well, his proof starts by assuming the opposites. On the thesis, he says, let us assume that compound substances did consist of simple parts. And off he goes on the reductio ad absurdum. You see? The same again in the third conflict on page 440. Causality, according to the laws of nature, is not only causality from which all phenomena of the world can be adduced. In order to account for these phenomena, it's necessary to admit another causality, that of freedom. In the antithesis, there's no freedom. And off he goes again. And then the fourth one on 444, so forth. So what he does in these cases is to argue then that we can prove nothing because of these contradictions. We can prove nothing about the infinity of the cosmos in time and space as against its finiteness. We can prove nothing about divisibility as against indivisibility. Nothing about determinism as against freedom. Nothing about necessity as against contingency. you see? Because the arguments have equal weight on both sides, we really can prove nothing at all. And as a result, therefore, what we end up with on page 447, his conclusion to this section is that what he calls transcendental idealism. Notice that phrase is italicized. Transcendental idealism. Yes, transcendental realism would change mere representations into things themselves. Then in the second column, transcendental idealism, on the contrary, allows that the objects of external intuition may be real as perceived in space and time as represented, but space itself, as well as time, with all phenomena, are not things by themselves. They cannot exist outside of the mind. And so his phenomenal-noumenal distinction is upheld. Do you follow that line of thought? I see David nodding his head. Okay, straightforward enough. Then turn your attention finally to the rational theology section, which begins on 463. And here what he's doing involves the three arguments for the existence of God, which up to his time were the traditional proofs. They are, one, the ontological argument; second, the cosmological; and the third, which he gives the fancy name of a physico-theological, is really simply a version of the teleological argument. Okay? These are also the three arguments discussed by Hume in his dialogues concerning natural religion. Okay? So it's the same agenda at juncture. If you say, no, wait a minute, isn't there a moral argument for the existence of God? Yes, but Kant is the one who first introduces it. So that comes later on. Now, the ontological argument then, first of all, you're familiar with it from Anselm, from Descartes, so forth. The idea of a being who necessarily exists. What's the problem here? Well, his problem is that it introduces the conception of necessity. It introduces the conception of necessity. You see. Put it this way. God exists. What sort of a proposition is that? Now be careful. Kant says that is not a proposition. A proposition has a subject and a predicate. Exists is not, logically, a predicate. You see. Because when you predicate something, you ascribe a property. Existence isn't a property. To say God exists is simply to say to leave the rest of the sentence blank. So when the ontological argument says God necessarily exists, saying God is necessary being, you've got to predicate something. But as soon as you predicate necessity, you're invoking an a priori concept. You see? One of the categories of modality, contingency and necessity. So the ontological argument, you see, trying to unpack the concept of God as necessary being, I guess I did it along here, is invoking a concept. He asks, is this an analytic statement? You see? No, it's not an analytic statement. Logically, the term God, definite name, whatever, isn't logically the same as necessity. It's not analytic. Must be synthetic. But where then do you get the idea of necessity? So the ontological argument involves a priori. It's problematic. Is simply a copula, linking subject and predicate. Now, the cosmological argument really depends on the ontological. Because the cosmological argument is arguing about causal dependence. Causal dependence. That is to say, it assumes the contingency of the cosmos on a necessary being. So it assumes the very thing which the ontological argument assumes. The cosmological argument presupposes the conclusion of the ontological argument. Now, of course, he could also have said that the concept of causation itself is an a priori category. Yes, sir. All right, and then the teleological, the physico-theological, the teleological argument. Well, what it's trying to do is to talk about the orderedness of the cosmos, the orderedness of things, the ordered unity which we observe, and to draw an inference from that. But that sort of an argument is arguing from the form, not the material existence of the cosmos. To argue from the form that it has is to argue for some architect, designer, you see. But you cannot affirm the existence of such a designer without having as your premise the existence of this ordered universe. But that is, would entail a cosmological argument for the existence. So the teleological argument